Magic is found in every room, where people connect over a shared purpose. Luke, Hannah and Chris explore the role of purpose, courage, mindset and culture in every leader's quest for transformational performance.
Hello and welcome to Magic in the Room. I'm Hannah Broderoot.
I'm Chris Province.
And I'm Luke Freeman, and today we are recording in the amazing Choctaw Casino Resort in Durant, Oklahoma at the National Native American Human Resources Association National Conference. It's big this year. It's sold out. It's their biggest one yet. We love partnering with NAHARA. We get to do lots of cool things with them, and this annual conference is one of those. And so it's really fun to be in person here from all of our different parts of the globe to in the room recording. So excited for that. Yeah.
It's a good day.
Yeah, it is. And it's also fun because this is the end of season 4. And this season of the podcast has been all about, what is it, not 4?
5.
Is it 5?
Yeah, season 5. Just
5
like you said.
years.
Just like I
Because
said.
when you
Okay.
said 4, I was like,
Really?
Wait, what?
has it only been 4 years?
It sure has felt like 5.
It felt longer than that.
I know for sure when we started, it was the end of 2019.
Yeah.
And
That
then
was like 3 years ago.
our first season went into COVID-19 shutdowns, and we kept recording every week remotely while we were.
We didn't have any work to do, so.
Speak for yourself.
Oh, gosh. Have you ever worked more than that? That was crazy.
It seems like, yes, ever since then.
Yes.
It started
That's
then.
started
maybe
then,
true.
and it has not slowed down.
Yeah. Yeah.
Oh, okay. I don't know where to restart. So
We're not restarting. We're leaving all that
we're
in.
leaving all this
Mhm.
in? Okay,
Mhm.
fine. Well, it's exciting that this is our last episode of season 5. Because, 5, as I was planning on saying before, 5 is a round number. Half of a decade of episodes here, of seasons. And this season was all about leading teams. And so we talked about that whole crazy transition from individual contributor to being a leader, and how sometimes it's just like getting smacked upside the head. No one ever told me I needed to do this stuff before. I got grades based on what I did as an individual. I got a job based on what I did as an individual. I got raises and promotions based on what I did as an individual. And now you're telling me that I'm being measured against what other people are doing. This team that now I'm assigned against their productivity. It is hard. It's a challenge. We talked about that, and we talked about what then are the skills? If I haven't learned those skills during all of that time when it was about me as an individual, what are those things? So we spent an episode on trust, an episode on really getting clear about what do we as a team commit to, and how do we provide accountability around those commitments. An episode around communicating effectively with our team and with other teams. An episode around navigating conflict. An episode around performance development, on feedback and engagement, one on corrective action, and then last month on meaningful recognition. And so here we are today with this wrap-up episode and key takeaways. So I'm excited to hear what takeaways were for you guys. I know I've got some great ones myself.
All right. You're just really holding on to them it's going to be the big reveal, right?
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's
okay.
after the commercial break. I'm
Okay.
going to be like, and you know what my biggest takeaway was?
All right.
Roll that ad, Ben.
We'll get to that right after the break. What a cliffhanger. The overarching themes for me is like, how do we as individual, like as leaders leading teams, how does our character show up? Like our artistry, right? Because I think every leader is an artist.
Yeah.
There's not hard and fast rules because every organization is different. Every competitive landscape is different. We may be in manufacturing, we may be in service, which have different motivating principles within those constructs. Every leader has to be an artist. Do we accept that? And how does my character show up in the art that I'm creating? And how does my character contribute to our organizational consciousness and our organizational character and ultimately the backbone of our brand?
Yeah.
So do I have the courage to allow my values to show up in how I lead? And am I committed to getting a little bit better every day in all the domains I'm responsible for and all the kind of areas of accountability? Can I just get 1% better every day? And then that's over the course of a year, if I can do that, I'm 37 times better than where we started. But it's that commitment to say, am I committed enough to my chosen profession and my commitment to lead that I can get a little bit better every day and be exponentially better at the end of a year than I am when we started? And embracing this idea that the character of every leader is exemplified and it reveals itself in the experience the leader delivers to team members. So the team that I lead is going to understand my character through their experiences with my approach, with the processes that I utilize, with the processes that I choose not to utilize, how I speak about our organization, how I honor them, how I steward their personal well-being. So I guess as we talk through this, it really emerges for me, and it highlights how leadership and the development of enterprises and the stewardship of people, it is an issue of character, it's an issue of morals, it's an issue and challenge of belief. Again, calling back to how intensely do I believe about the greatest good of this organization? And my intensity of belief about that good is going to correlate to how much sacrifice and discretionary effort I'm willing to put towards its success. And I think that's why it calls out, like, as leaders, we have to make sure we're in the right spot. We have to make sure we're in the right community that believes the way I believe, that the greatest good of this organization is something that I perceive to be worthwhile, and I'm not just here cashing a check. By the same token, we need to communicate the greatest good of this organization and my values as a leader to the team members I've brought on, so they can confirm that what I believe is the person leading and stewarding them and what they believe is aligned. And here's how we work together to advance this organization. And that is ground zero for our culture. How I interview and go outside of the skill set to hire more than the pair of hands, to hire the person, and then this organization has a proper orientation to our good. And I am leading a process that properly onboards them to the technical and social functions of our work together. And there's a communications framework in place that continues to forge trust and healthy relationships. And, these are all things that as a leader we have to embrace. And we don't just get to say, I have the best penmanship, so that technical skill gives me the authority to teach everyone how to write. That doesn't make me a leader. A technical skill does not make me a leader. It's these other discoveries and the embracing and the commitment and the intensity to which I commit that makes me a leader. And I think that's what all these things scratch at. When you talk about trust and accountability and effective communication and working through conflict and stewarding someone's career through performance development, or the willingness and the courage to ask for feedback on how am I doing supporting you, or how do you need me to show up differently? The courage to, take time to correct behavior and coach someone directionally, and to honor them and confirm that the work they do matters through recognition. To me, it continues to highlight the idea of leadership being a challenge of character and how we rise and accept that mark of distinction. And, with that said, now I'm looking forward to how do we, in the next season, talk about leading leaders and how that translates. How do those same kind of commitments and obligations, how does that translate to me developing leaders in a way that's different than the way that I lead teams? So those are my takeaways.
Yeah. I really appreciate what you shared, Chris. And I think a big takeaway for me is that it all comes back to trust, which was really, after we kind of talked about what Luke shared, how I make this transition from being an individual contributor to a team leader, we spent a whole episode really talking about trust, because without trust, none of this is possible. But it really starts with trust in myself and the courage to do this thing called leadership, which can be really hard, especially when we do all the things that we've talked about in this season. It takes a lot of courage. And so trusting myself that I have what it takes, that I can find the path, because leading people is difficult. It is harder than rocket science. You can apply math to rocket science. You cannot apply math to human beings. They are irregular and they are unpredictable. And what works with one human won't work with another. It is really challenging. So trusting myself and having the courage to do what needs to be done, that's really the first commitment of leadership. So it means how we build trust, right? We honor commitments. So that means I have to honor the commitments to me, to do the things that make me a better leader. And those are all the things that we talked about in the previous season, right? Around intentional leadership and self-leadership, building self-awareness as a three-dimensional human being, right? And then honoring those commitments I make to myself to do the reflection, to really think about the implications and the impacts of my behavior, how it affects other people, and the emotional intelligence that takes, right? All of those things are really part of building the trust in myself and my own capabilities so that I can then extend trust to the people on my team. And trust is a continuous, ongoing endeavor. Just because there's been trust doesn't mean that trust will always be there. If trust has been broken, how quickly and how do we repair it? And how intentional are we in repairing trust? And how do we extend trust to others and expect it back in return?
I like it. And that idea of trusted leader, and when we move from more of that technical individual contributor to the team leader, right, where we're trusted to develop and initiate action and coordinate activity of a group of people towards a common goal. Like, not only do we have to immediately jump into development as a leader, there is a function of, the technical skills change. I don't completely let go of them. They shift a bit. Again, I might develop technical leadership skills.
Sure.
Right? But the idea that I somehow am over development is unequivocally not true.
Mm-hmm.
Like, in fact, if I want to help more people from that place of incompetence to competence, I have to be more invested in my development so that I can help more and more people across that bridge. And I think that call out is like, it requires definitely care and love for the other person to want to help them across that bridge, but I have to be outfitted to do so. Right? I don't want to haphazardly go on a journey over a bridge that's dangerous. When we're learning how to ride a bike, one of the two people in that equation already know how to ride a bike. So it's that idea, again, stewardship showing up and saying, hey, a trusted leader is going to be someone that people can look to and know they're going to get across that bridge from incompetency to competency safely.
Hmm.
And I think that shows up. The opposite is true with a dangerous or untrusted leader. They're just not able to help enough people across the bridge, or if they kick their feet up on the desk and say, I've already worked like you've worked, that's what got me here, I was so good at it, that person's not going to be trusted to actually lead. Interesting. Time for the big reveal after the break.
I was at dinner with a friend that I grew up with a couple nights ago, and we were talking about people who had been really influential to us when we were in middle school and high school. These people who were real mentors and leaders, and now he and I are both in our mid-40s, and these people are a couple decades past that. And we'd had these independent conversations with people around items that we are now expert in, where it felt like that we have surpassed the mentor and the mentor doesn't know it, right? They've gotten to this place in life where there's some measure of, I don't want to say irrelevancy because I don't think people are irrelevant, but a place where there is a blind spot because culture has changed, best practice has changed, scientific discovery has changed, whatever it is. And the zeitgeist, right, out there in the world has changed, and they have not followed or not adjusted to it. And I have the suspicion that we can't avoid that 100%. I have the suspicion that when I'm in my 80s, I probably am going to have big blind spots and not know it and be convinced that I'm right about something that I really don't know about. And personally, I have tried to prepare for that by talking to my kids about them being smarter than me one day. And I do say, like, you're not smarter than me yet. But the day will come, probably not too long in some topics, where they really are smarter than me about some things. And I want them to be able to be like, hey, Dad, remember when I was 15 and you were in your 40s and you told me that I would be smarter than you? Like, we're here. This is the conversation. You should just listen to me. And I want to be able to say, oh my gosh, teach me, right? That's what I want. Part of this is my own personal issues around wanting to be in control and wanting to be competent. So I'm trying to figure out, how do I stay in control and stay competent, even though that is an unwinnable game, because at some point we will all be out of control. And at some point we will exit this world and we will, by definition, not be competent of doing anything at that point. Right. So I get that I'm maybe chasing something that isn't reality, but I tell this story about talking to previous mentors and realizing that, oh gosh, like, I know more about that. I know more than them about some topics, and wow, like, this is different. It's a role reversal. I'd say all of that to share that I think leadership at its core, and this is my takeaway from this season, is about the ability to change. It's about the ability to see that the teams that we lead are human beings that are influenced by other departments, the wider culture, what's happening in their family, what they're seeing in media, all the technology change that's happening. And leaders are able to take all of that and somehow digest it internally and adjust their approach to figure out, what do those people need? What does that team need? And that is something that we can never give the right answer about on this podcast. We can talk about all the topics from this last season. And I think, one of my biggest complaints about this podcast is that sometimes we don't get tactical or prescriptive enough. And I know that when we get feedback from other people that listen, sometimes they're like, yeah, but what do I do? Like, I hear all this, but what do I actually do? And like the reality is we can't say.
Mhm.
We can talk about trust and corrective action and recognition and performance development and conflict management. And the right way to respond to all of those things right now in your team probably depends on the particulars and how much of an artist, as Chris said, you are. Do you have the competency to work with actual human beings and change your approach, try something different? So for me, that's a takeaway, is that we can never be prescriptive enough, because if we do that, we are going to automatically start giving bad advice.
Yes.
We will automatically disqualify ourselves from being good advisors because the answer depends, and we can never get away from the correct answer depends. Tell me more.
Yeah.
And so that's half of my takeaway.
Yeah.
Sorry, I'm going to keep talking here.
Please do.
The other half is like, what are we going towards as leaders when we talk about these things? Trust, commitments, accountability, communication, conflict, feedback, engagement. What is it that we're moving towards? And this is a segue to next season. It is about our team members having agency in their own lives and having power and freedom to choose in their own lives. And the fact that we have influence over them, like, what do we use that influence for? If it is anything other than giving away power to them to have choice and agency, to opt in, to opt out, to choose where they spend their time and their priority, like, I think we're getting it wrong if part of our goal is not to deliver agency and freedom to the people that we lead. And like, if I was going to give shorthand to that, that's love. Like, we got to love the people that we work alongside and that would say that they're on our team. And if we love them, we are giving them freedom and agency to keep being a part of the team, to go grow and do something else, to give us feedback, to do all of those things. So those are my takeaways.
I love something that this sparked for me. I love this idea that development is ongoing. And to quote Socrates, the more I know what I don't know. And so having the humility as we grow in leadership and advance in years to recognize that there's more and more that we don't know, and that we can learn so much from the people that we lead, and to keep that open mind so that, and again, we're keep teasing next season here when we talk about leading leaders, to continue to stay humble and recognize, oh, now there's another shift, there's another skill set, there's another transition, another passage that I'm making on this leadership journey. And to have that learner mindset. There's a quote I read a while back, and I'm going to paraphrase and butcher it a little bit, but it's about the learners inherit the earth because the learned will find themselves beautifully equipped to deal with a world that no longer exists.
Mm-hmm.
And so when we recognize that when we think that we know it all, or that we have seen it all, or done it all, or learned it all, that's when we stop growing. That's when we stagnate. And that's when the world will pass us by and we remain equipped to not have an impact or to not even be relevant.
Yeah. I'm going to tell a little bit of a story on that just to illustrate the point you're making.
Is it about him and Hans getting scurry?
Oh my gosh. No.
Okay.
You can tell that
gosh.
story.
Everyone who gets that reference, I hope, is laughing and shaking. Yeah. Okay. No, every month I am a part of helping to lead a staff meeting of one of our kind of client organizations. And we kick off that staff meeting by doing kind of a get to know you trust building question that people discuss in small groups before we get into like the announcements and whatever's coming up that month. So last month, the question we came up with was, what is a blind spot that you have? When did you realize that you have that blind spot, and how do you manage it today? And I thought, like, this is a pretty good question. Like, that's a good one. And so I even gave an example, and I told a story, and I've told the story on this podcast before, so you can go listen back and find it. But so they had an example of a blind spot, and then we broke up into small groups, and the group that I was in, 2 out of the 5 people couldn't think of a blind spot that they have. And I was just like, oh, this is kind of a problem.
Right.
And so I would bring that back to say, like, that's a good thought experiment for what Hannah's saying about, like, the learners inherit the earth. One way to test if you're a learner or not is, like, when's the last time you discovered a blind spot that you had, and how are you managing it?
Mm-hmm.
And if you're going to lead other people and you are not actively looking for how do I minimize those blind spots and then manage them, fill them in, build competency and capacity there, it's going to be a tough. And at some point, you will be the learned who knows really well how to manage a world that doesn't exist anymore.
Yeah, that's, talking about application and, like, do we get prescriptive enough? The same way that, and I talk about leaders being artists and this being really a challenge of and a calling of character and morals and, like, the world you want to create. Like, what is the world you want to exist in? And are you the type of artist that can create that? I could ask Luke, like, hey, Luke, how should I parent my children? Probably the wrong question.
Mm-hmm.
Even if I asked Luke, hey, Spencer's really good at like action sports and skateboarding and bicycling and really has kind of a penchant for that. Like, and I know you know a ton about mountain biking, but if I were to say, how should I teach mountain biking to my daughter, Spencer? He still has no context. I have a current state with that team, and I have a future state that I need to define before the agenda or prescription can be built. So just thinking about what is intentional change, it does not call for a specific prescription. We can talk about, here's some things to get started. Here's some general ideas of how that looks or how that can be experienced. But the current state of the team and that condition and the future state that is aspirational in what we want to work towards ultimately determines the agenda or the prescription. We can go back to our episode on intentional change and review that idea. But that's why the prescriptions can't be issued as prescriptions, because we don't have context to your current state or your vision of that inspired future. Because we don't have those definitions, any prescription we actually give and say, go do this, would be ill-advised. Something I want to call out for new leaders and for people entering this space, if we want to get into that a little bit, is just embracing the idea that how your job looks will be informed differently than when I did your job. And there can exist large gaps between desktop knowledge and local knowledge. Like what the team members are actually experiencing in their day-to-day work with members of other departments or with customers or players or guests or whatever it is we're serving. Their experience locally can be much different than what I'm reading on the desktop, because I'm looking at performance metrics and sales numbers and efficiencies and all this desktop knowledge. And if I do that without a deep understanding of what's happening locally or in those day-to-day interactions, I'm effectively adding risk to my decision-making process. So as a new leader, you'll always want to monitor what's happening locally and balancing that versus kind of the metrics that you're trying to manage on that desktop. And to your point, Luke, for all new leaders, it's important to pump the brakes, because a lot of times we want to focus what's on the desktop, but to the people on the team, nothing matters more than what's happening locally, what's happening in their day-to-day. And that's why those check-ins, like when we start meetings, it's about what's good, contemplate something, reflect something, like pump the brakes a little bit and understand, like there is an obligation to understand and support their local existence before we try to manage the desktop outcomes. What advice would you have for a new leader kind of working through this season, Hannah?
I think it goes back to what I started saying earlier, how leadership is hard, and also this basic assumption that we have, that we've kind of stated throughout these last 2 seasons, that everyone is a leader, and the sooner you accept and acknowledge that, the more effective you will be. So think about how you can add more intentionality, that you're not going to have all the answers, and that leadership is more about asking the right questions than having the right answer. I think if there's one thing that can really transform the way you lead and your effectiveness, is if you can make that transition. It's about what questions are you asking that will help to induce insight in the minds of the people you lead, whether it's in a one-on-one conversation or in a meeting, to help people think through and become problem solvers rather than being the one who has all the answers.
Yeah.
That may have been how we got promoted to leadership. And back to Luke's point, like that is the challenge of this transition, because I've been recognized and awarded throughout my career for being the problem solver and having the answers. And now that is no longer the most important skill.
Luke, what's your thoughts for new leaders?
Curiosity, humility. Don't assume that what worked for you is going to work with other people.
Amen to that.
And I think if we can make the shift from, hey, why don't you try doing it this way? Or, hey, I need this result, to instead say, hey, help me understand why we got this outcome, like what happened, and help me understand the choices that you made. We might have some good advice and some good direction even after the conversation, but if we start from a place of curiosity, I think as a new leader, that's a very effective way to enter the role, is to anchor yourself in curiosity with the team. And obviously there's exceptions, right? If something's dangerous, something's illegal, something's whatever, like, yeah, bring your experience to bear. And if there are times we can come with curiosity, that's good. The other thing I'll say about that is the more we help people understand why we do things the way we do them, the better outcomes we're going to get. And this is a bit of a segue to leading leaders, but we should be helping people learn how to think. And we should be teaching underlying principles and not just technique. And if we can outfit people with why we do things the way we do them, why we've set up a process the way we've set it up, why we have written a policy the way that policy has been written, then they are much more equipped to, whenever the plan goes awry, whenever the piece of equipment breaks, whenever so-and-so doesn't show up, we get much better outcomes if they understand why they're doing what they're doing. Not just, hey, I need you to check all these boxes. Here's why this sheet with all these boxes exists. And here's why these boxes got on the sheet, each one of them. And so when things go awry, like, you can figure it out. You got it. Yeah.
And then to add on to that, we teach the why and then we show the how, right? That's leading by example. We really teach the underlying principles of why we do something, but then we also walk alongside people and show them step by step and help people learn how to actually do the thing.
Yeah.
Awesome. Well, you kind of spoke to that, kind of what's next with leading leaders. I mean, kind of thinking about this scaffold: lead myself, learn how to lead teams, learn how to then lead and develop leaders for the sustainability and the continued vibrance of the organization. Hannah, as you think about next season, what are you excited about?
I'm excited about so many things, but as we've been kind of talking today, I've been thinking about this idea of autonomy and choice. And if we can demonstrate that, even in the way we teach other leaders to because really central to motivation is autonomy of time, task, and team. So when I work on something, what I choose to work on when, and then with whom, if we have some autonomy around those things, we feel more motivated. And so if we as leaders can demonstrate that by actually leading our teams and the leaders that we lead in that way, they're going to feel more empowered, and to use Luke's word, you talked about agency and giving power to people. When we lead leaders, that's the number one thing. How can we empower those leaders to lead and to have agency in the way that they lead?
And just knowing those domains, right? So much about education and learning, sometimes it's naming the things that is most helpful. And I think when we talk through leading leaders, there's a lot of language pickup in that particular function. It's like, well, what does it mean to model the way? And this whole idea that I can train you on how to change a light bulb. I can't train you to build better relationships. Like there's something about the learning as a process or education as a process. So if I'm going to, if we're going to learn how to build better relationships, I have to see that. We call that social learning, right? And it happens a lot in organizations, and it's vortex up and vortex down. Like if we socially learn in a really healthy way, it takes us to really great places. And if we're not learning socially, or we're just not very effective at doing that in a positive way, then it can really discount our brands and organizations. So I'm looking forward to diving into that and really say, okay, how do we entrench these ideas and the culture of our company into the people that will continue to elevate and take us into whatever the next season is for this enterprise or community. It's been a good one.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm excited.
This 5th season.
Season 5. It's in the books, man.
In the books. Yeah. So
anybody know what episode number we're on?
Nope.
Approaching 200? Because 200's got to be a big celebration.
I bet you it'll be in the title of this episode.
Yeah, it will be. Check the title of the episode. It'll tell us what number it is.
Tell us if we're having a party or not.
Well, we'll know on episode 200. There'll be a lot of balloons. We didn't celebrate 100 because,
Well, you had to get to 150 to be any good at it.
Exactly.
Is what we were told.
Yes.
Yep.
So on episode 200, we'll actually, it's balloons and cake, I think.
We can totally cruise control after that.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. Easy.
But hey, guys, we're going to head into season 6.
Yeah, right?
That's pretty cool.
Yeah. Yeah, it is. Well, I'm excited about it. I'm excited about leading leaders. I'm personally passionate about leadership development. And I think in a work context is the very best place to do leadership development, because it is just a series of experiments and experiential learning that we get to debrief. So leading leaders is all around setting goals and then being able to learn. How do we learn from experience? How do we learn from how that leader's department meeting kickoff went? And how do we learn from what their KPI conversations with their teams are. And it's just a whole lot about facilitation, which is awesome. Like, I love that stuff. So it'll be good.
Well,
it'll be good.
I mean, if for any listeners out there that are thinking about leading teams, obviously this, we have this as a program. If you want to bring this to your organization, whether it's from us or someone else, we'd be more than happy to talk with you about those different components. You can find us at purposeandperformancegroup.com. We're on all the socials. You can find us on LinkedIn, Facebook, Instagram. If you don't mind, we're at the end of the season, and outside of the $0 we make for the podcast, your reviews are our compensation.
That's the only compensation.
That's
is
right.
the 5-star reviews.
Yes. And if you like what we do, and you think that any episode from the season was worth 5 stars, punch that button.
I'll commit to this. I will eat a piece of celebratory cake for every 5-star review we get. So if you do it, you can be knowing I'm feeding Luke a piece of cake.
There we go.
Then you win. You feel really good. And I win in the short term unless we get too much response.
No, we need 200 5-star reviews. And make Luke eat the whole cake. So yeah, if you love it, if you'd like to leave a review, smash that 5 stars. If you didn't like it, don't say anything and don't hit any buttons. Okay. So we'll just go with that approach. But no, just leave a review. Let us know what you think of the episodes and the work that we do here on Magic in the Room. Thank you for the gift of your time and giving us a listen. Hopefully you enjoyed all the downloads. I think that's something that will continue into season 5 as well. But just appreciate everyone out there.
Yeah. Magic in the Room is hosted by Chris Province, Hannah Broderud, and Luke Freeman. It is produced by Ben West. Social media management is by Emma Holland and Maggie King Robinson. Our theme music is by Evan Grimm. You can find his music on Apple Music. This episode was recorded on site at Choctaw Casino Resort during the annual National Native American HR Association Conference in Durant, Oklahoma. Magic in the Room is a production of Purpose and Performance Group. Find us at purposeandperformancegroup.com. You can find previous episodes at magicintheroom.com.